Okay, welcome everybody to the town board meeting of Tuesday, November 26, 2019. Start off some announcements. Thanksgiving dinner on Thursday, 12 to 2 at the community center. All are welcome. Small Business Saturday is this Saturday. Support our local merchants. Horace Greeley House Holiday Festivities, Saturday, December 7th. Open house from 1 to 6. Art and crafts from 4 to 6. Community sing at 3:30 with the Chapco Orchestra. And the tree lighting at 5 p.m. Horace Greeley Scholarship Fund Game Night, Friday, December 6th, 7:30 p.m. at Chapco Crossing. And then the following week, Friday, December 13th, we have Wine Around Town and Art Around Town combining forces. Let's see, supervisor report, I'll just try to bang through real quick. Let's see, we had our groundbreaking tonight for our inclusive playground and basketball court. That took place at 6 o'clock tonight. We had our Epic ambassadors take part in the ceremony. And they are kids, our Epic ambassadors are kids, teens, and adults with special needs who live in Newcastle and volunteer at time to be advocates for inclusion. And this inclusive playground will certainly go a long way in that part. And we have a basketball court coming as well, a full court, lighted basketball court. So that was all very exciting. We had our groundbreaking for the, ribbon cutting for the streetscape a couple weeks back. And let's see, downtown Chapco rezoning, we have our first draft of the form-based code. And the work group met a couple weeks back and sending some revisions. And you can check that out at plannewcastle.us, plannewcastle.us. The traffic light at Chapco Crossing is fully operational. Did Verizon open yet, or no?
I believe they did, yeah.
Okay, so Verizon Wireless is open. And do we have a date for Starbucks yet, or?
Yes. December 6th or 8th.
Okay.
8th is a Monday, 6th is a Friday.
Okay, so the first week in December, we'll say approximately. And the 2020 preliminary budget. The public hearing on the budget is scheduled for next week, December 3rd, and the budget will be adopted and voted on December 10th at our board meeting. And that's pretty much it. Now, Jill is not here. We have Rob Deary in her place. But thank you for your shit. So I'll just do our administrator's report. I guess I could have given this to you. You have it?
I have it.
Oh, please. They use a high voice.
Just a couple items tonight on the administrator's report. The downtown infrastructure project is substantially complete. We saw the ELQ trucks pull away today after they finished out the parking area out front. They do have a few punch list items that will be addressed through the spring, most notably the installation of handrails throughout the town. The traffic signal was activated yesterday, along with the pedestrian crosswalk signs at the intersection of King and Greeley. As Rob mentioned, the construction of the inclusive playground and basketball court has started. The groundbreaking was earlier this evening. We expect the project to be completed by the end of June 2020. During the construction, the pedestrian path from Town Hall lot to the commuter lot has been relocated to the south of the playground, a little bit closer to Washington Avenue. The relocated path will be open on Monday morning. Construction will also impact parking at Town Hall. As you might have seen out front, we've created employee parking where the construction stuff used to be, and we're going to leave the paved spots for residents to come in and transact business at Town Hall. I note that fire district elections will be held Tuesday, December 10th. At Millwood Firehouse will be from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., and at the Chappaqua Firehouse from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. And lastly, Town Hall will close at 3 p.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, November 27th. Town Hall will also be closed on Thursday and Friday in celebration of Thanksgiving, and we wish everyone a happy holiday.
Thank you. That was really from Joe, though, so Rob wasn't really wishing us a happy holiday. Joe was. Okay, so now we are going to open a public hearing. Petition of Summit Greenfield SG Chapaqua B LLC for various amendments, and motion various amendments to the East Village zoning text and map. So motion to open the hearing.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, do we want to, is the applicant going to do a presentation?
I think the applicant should, while he's walking up, just for the record, that petition was referred to Westchester County in the board's packet is the November 8, 29 comment letter from the county on the zoning text and map amendment, saying that it's a matter of local decision. This was also referred to the town planning board, but is still in the process of reviewing it.
Good evening, Mark Weingarten, partner in the law firm of Delbello, Donnell, Weingarten, Wise, and Wiedeker, on behalf of the applicant tonight for the property known as Chappaqua Crossing. We're going to keep this very brief, as we've been instructed in our discussions. We've been before you for a number of months. It feels like it's interesting that it's the first public hearing, but there was an informal presentation of the petition back in August is when we submitted it, and we've been having conversations over the last few months. We've been narrowing down the issues. It's really a couple of just a few categories that are there. There's a category of items that are really cleanup from the commercial and original residential approvals that are already up and built, things like having the boundary lines line up with the parking that already exists there, having the number of bedrooms accurately reflected in the PDCP that from what was actually built, things of that nature. And clearly the more important ones that are before you now are the things that impact the East Village and the residential proposal for the townhomes that are before you. With respect to that, as you know, in your joint meeting, we had conversations with the planning board, and there have been a number of items that were requested with respect to documentation. We looked at them this afternoon. They're ready. They're actually, frankly, we're very happy with them. The visuals that were requested from the neighbors' properties, for example, the school district numbers, the things that all the things that you requested will be submitted tomorrow before you guys close. I think it's at 3 o'clock. We're going to coordinate it with your council. So you're going to have all of that, and it will be submitted in advance of the planning board meeting, which is next week. So that is the ongoing thing. So at this point, I think you're here to hear from the public tonight. So we'll take a seat and we'll be here if there's anything that any questions or any way we can be helpful. We'll be available for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gray, we know why you're here,
Yep.
to speak about the Bedford House.
Ready?
Ready?
Tip this down for a little me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I on? Okay. Thank you. I'm appearing tonight as your town historian, but also on behalf of the Landmark Advisory Committee. As I understand it, we are presented with two alternatives concerning the former Reader's Digest guest house. First is to leave the building as it is, vacant, without a practical purpose for it or any land under it. The second is to completely remove the interior to create one large interior space. With all due respect, with a lot of regret, we consider this to be a Hobson's choice, and we can't find either alternative acceptable. The first alternative, we believe, should be dismissed immediately, and we urge you to do so. Basic rule of historic preservation is that no building can successfully be preserved without a site for it or a practical use for it. It has to be repurposed. To abandon this building without either of those is simply to condemn it to eventual destruction by neglect. We think that should just be laid aside. The second alternative is hardly more attractive. In our view, it doesn't represent a compromise, but an abject surrender. Reducing this landmark house to an empty husk would utterly betray its history and its integrity. By a combination of luck and intents, this house is unique. There's really nothing quite like it. It was home to just one family, well into the 20th century. It wasn't touched during its brief ownership by the Lawrences. And then it was carefully and lovingly stabilized and restored by the Reader's Digest under the direct supervision of Mrs. Wallace. That's part of its history too. And we can't agree that all of that should be sacrificed. We also object on grounds that this proposal is so extreme, so impractical, and so risky. This isn't a modern building. It's a post and beam building, which depends on an internal structure of bearing walls and cross beams to hold it together and to hold it up. You can't just empty it out like a box. If all the interior supports are removed, a temporary exterior structure will be needed to keep the walls from collapsing, and then a completely new structure has to be built inside. A completely new roof will have to be built. The process will be immensely expensive, and if anything goes wrong and any of the walls collapse in the process, there'll be nothing to show for the effort. And even if that effort is successful, the result will be a building, but it won't be that building. It'll be stage flats for an empty shell. Back in 2009, Summit Greenfield refused to allow this house and the headquarters building to be designated as landmarks, but promised in writing to preserve both. That promise has been admirably kept with the repurposing of the headquarters. Somehow the promise got overlooked when it came to this house. We urge you, so long as you have any control over the site, to find other alternatives in order to fulfill that promise. The easiest solution would depend on Toll Brothers. If they would be willing to reconsider the program for the interior and could find uses for its existing spaces as part of the clubhouse complex, then problems such as nonconformity with modern building codes could be overcome. Otherwise, we see no alternative but to step back and undo the mistake that was made 2 years ago. When the property passed into the hands of Toll Brothers without firm provision for the preservation of the house, Summit Greenfield's promise was inevitably broken. What should have happened was that a plan for the preservation should have been prepared, including the provision of a separate site so that the building could be repurposed by somebody else. This still may prove to be the only possible remedy for an admittedly difficult situation. Thank you for hearing us out. Do you have any questions or any points you'd like to discuss?
Well, I would just point out that as far as the promise you're referring to, I mean, the cupola building was gutted. You said they maintained their promise, and the cupola building was completely gutted, and they maintained the exterior.
We never considered that to be a historic interior.
There's been a lot of changes to the interior of the Bedford House as well, though.
Well, but that isn't all of the piece. As I say, this building is unique inside and out. It's a special case. It's 150 years old.
But the inside has been changed 60 years ago. There's new
Not-
floors.
no,
there's-
it really
there's
wasn't.
wires in there, there's...
They rewired, they put in bathrooms, good heavens. But the
Fireplace.
basic plan and the basic structure is better preserved than any of the other ones. We have only a handful of these left. This comes from a period of relatively prosperous times in agriculture, and a lot of people built what we call center hall colonials. There are a handful of them around. But this is by far the most important and by far the best. It was meant to be a showpiece, and it was. And as I say, it was unchanged because one family occupied it. And the Reader's Digest did as little as possible to fuss with it. Consequently, the interior spaces are still virtually the same, and anything that they did could be undone. But even when they had to make replacements, like the old floors, they did it with historically appropriate materials. This is quite special. We hate to see it ruined.
Most people, though, most people are never going to step foot in the cupola building, 10 years ago or today, and most people are never going to step foot in this Bedford House. It's just going to be limited to the people that buy the townhomes. So at least by preserving the outside, like we do with the cupola building, the residents and everybody who passes it are gonna be seeing exactly what's been there for 100 years.
It's just a stage set. Billboards for the building, it was really there.
Pretend antique.
Excuse me?
Pretend antique.
So then you could say that about the
No,
cupola
it
building
was
too.
just empty facades. No, it just isn't the same.
So
The
I
one
was,
thing they did retain the cupola,
Yeah.
which they could have torn down. They didn't realize, maybe most people don't realize what its original function was. It's a very clever way of hiding the chimney. But they hung on to it, went to a considerable expense. I'm very glad that it turned out the way it turned out. We were consulted at that time. We did meet with the architect and discussed our concerns, and some of the proposals that were made, we said we didn't think were right, like big plate glass windows for Whole Foods. But they went over that, and what comes out is, I think, very fine. But it wasn't a complete gut, and we just never considered the interior all that historic. This is different. I can't help you on that one.
According to, their requirement, it's very similar to the cupola building. They either, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, the two options that you mentioned. They
I'm
either-
sorry, what was that?
The two options that you mentioned is what they're required to do. So if they're not willing to preserve it as is, then they have the other option, which is to maintain the exterior. That's their requirement according to
Findings.
the finding
The
statement.
challenge that we have, and we did explore this with our council, is when you reference the letter, what was put in writing with regard to the promise to preserve the building, our council's interpretation of preserve does not pertain to the interior of the building, but only to the exterior of the building. So we feel that, we're sort of a little bit backed into a corner here, and this board felt, along with the planning board when we discussed this 2 weeks ago, that preserving the exterior of the building represented a compromise, and a compromise that does come at a cost to the applicant. So, I guess the question to you would be, when you say that there's, neither one of these options is desirable, there's of course the third option no one's talking about, which is that the building could be knocked down. And I assume
we
that
got over
too,
that.
that the empty shell is still preferable to the idea of knocking down the building, right?
All I can say is I wish I had known something was what
Me
was
too.
going on.
Me too, but that's where we're at today.
there's no option to sell
Ordinarily,
the property?
you're right, the most preservation statutes and so forth don't include interiors, but sometimes they do. It depends. This is, as I say, I wouldn't be making such a fuss if this wasn't such a special case. You must do what you think is in the public interest, and what the law allows, we can only advise.
So I wonder, this is kind of a question for Toll Brothers a little bit. The only clubhouses that I've been in are like the ones in Florida that my mother-in-law lives in, where they have, card rooms, and then separately, there's a separate building that has a gym and things like that. So I'm just wondering, I don't know what your thoughts were that
Well,
this
it did occur
clubhouse
to
would
us.
encompass? Is there a way to kind of utilize some of the existing space for, I don't know if people play cards in New York, but, or if they all moved to Florida, I don't know, but, if there's a, way to utilize it where the smaller spaces can be utilized for some of the clubhouse, and then add on, a more modern building to the back that can be attached, sometimes that
They
can
want
be
to put
done
in a
very
fitness
nicely.
center, and they want a large space, there's no question about it. I'm not familiar with the program, but if the program indeed included the use of spaces for smaller meetings and members entertaining, because the condominium units will not be that large, for members' clubs, again, afternoon meetings and so forth. Yes, most clubs that I'm familiar with, both country clubs and city clubs, do have these provisions for smaller spaces. And there are sort of 3 on the first floor, or 2 maybe, and 4 on the second. Accommodations will have to be made for exterior access. Fortunately, the building is very close to grade. You can make a ramp to meet that. There would probably have to be an extra staircase because the existing staircase is very narrow. And that center hall, you can't do anything with because the 2 walls on either side are central to the support of the building. But you can work around the problems of accessibility and codes with the state, the Division of Building Standards
Right.
local office.
Yeah.
We had to do this, I speak from personal experience on that one because we had to do all that with the Greeley House, which is rife with nonconformities. But that's up to Toll Brothers. They have to say, well, yes, we can adjust our program for the building in this way.
Well, they're sitting right behind you, so I'd be curious if that's something you guys have considered. I haven't seen.
We have asked before, right?
Right.
Just to be clear.
Is there anyone else that wants to talk in the guest house? And then we'll be happy to tell you what our position is. If you want to go one at a time, it's up to you.
Yes.
Well, maybe we should get all the comments and then we'll
Sure.
chat.
Sure.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Bill Bierce. I'm at 512 Bedford Road. And I'm right near the guest house. I'm between Cowden and Kittle Roads. So very close. And I hear all the noise. I hear all what's going on. I go through the traffic. I know the problems. What we have in the guest house is a heritage that goes back to the Reader's Digest and to the Wallaces and to what was once a rural Chappaqua. And what we have that's been constructed is the total opposite. And so the preservation of this house, whatever the cost for the structural integrity, is, I think, part of the neighborhood. It's our community. It's what we believe goes back to a point with the cupola building, goes back to the point where there was this patronizing family that provided welfare in addition to jobs. So it's not just a building. So I'd like to, now, as to the interior, is my understanding that the exterior is now protected and there is no question that that's in dispute?
Well, look, there are 3 options, which is that the third option could be that they just totally rip it down and build a brand-new structure, and quite honestly, that would be the cheapest option for them. I don't think that's an option that any of us are in favor of. I think when we had our meeting 2 weeks ago at the planning board, there was a consensus was that the second, as Ivy mentioned, the second option was best, to preserve the outside, like they did with the cupola building, and reuse the inside as they see fit. And that's all they're required to do. Either they maintain it as is, or they repurpose it, like they did with the cupola building.
So as a matter of local law, is the destruction a possibility?
The destruction is not a possibility. They cannot tear it down right now if they wanted to, unless we amended our finding statement to allow them to do that.
Okay, fine. So I'm here for protecting the exterior and protecting the building. The interior is a different subject. Thank you.
I just want to ask, I just want to confirm that the building is structurally sound as it stands today.
Rob, did you speak to the building inspector?
I did speak to the building inspector, and the building wouldn't be used as a clubhouse as it is today. It doesn't meet any of the standards. It needs to be completely gutted. Essentially, I mean, Mark, I'm sure, will say the same exact thing. They're going to be building a brand-new, structure inside the building. Nothing in the inside is going to be new roof. Everything's going to have to be changed to make this building up to code and usable as a clubhouse.
That's going on the assumption that it has to meet codes.
Well, Greg, also, there's also the practical listen, Toll Brothers can speak for themselves, but if I'm buying $1 million townhome, I personally like a clubhouse that's gonna be new and nice. and,
So
not just
my
old.
question remains, I just wanna confirm with you that the building as it stands today is a structurally sound building.
Look, it's not gonna fall down on its own right now. If it were left in its current condition and, to deteriorate as it has at some point in the future,
Well,
how
I
long
mean,
in the
of
future.
course, if no work was ever done on it ever,
Right.
time will do its damage.
Yeah, but look, there has
I
been
can-
significant water intrusion, there's significant mold growth, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Has this been documented?
Yeah, so we, part of our submission tomorrow will include a comprehensive report on the clubhouse. It includes a structural analysis as well as an analysis by a third-party architect that went through, and we asked them to really look at, like, how can we make this work, right? We heard you guys loud and clear, we were before you a couple of months ago, that, we had to go back to the drawing board. But, unfortunately, what's realized when you start looking at the interior is, it doesn't meet any accessibility standards. So, everything from hallway widths to handrail heights to doorway openings to ceiling heights, like, there's accessibility and life and safety codes that you just can't meet in a structure of that age to bring it up to the standard that it needs to be for a public congregation space. So, we're trying to find a balance that, provides a real use to the residents who are going to benefit from that, and also have the maintenance obligation going forward on this building, right? The residents of the East Village are going to be the ones who are going to maintain this structure going forward. But from the exterior, still provides the benefit to the residents of the town. So when they drive into Chappaqua Crossing, the structure that has always been there is now there, but it's presented in its best light possible, right? I mean, really, once you start, peeling apart, this onion, the exterior cladding is going to get replaced, the windows are going to get replaced, the thermal envelope has got to get replaced, like all of these things to make sure that this structure is now sustainable and usable going forward. That's going to be our task. So it's unfortunate that you can't go in and just do some aesthetic renovations to it and bring it up to modernize the interior of it and clean up the exterior. The structure's just not built to accommodate the use that it
So
needs to
your
be.
plans would be to reinforce it with like steel and engineered things?
Yeah, look, that's like stage 2 of our analysis, right? We looked at some really, what are we kind of high level? What are we dealing with? Can we get the programming to work? So the way we approached it is all of the real functionality of a newer structure, like your bathrooms and your locker rooms that will service the pool. You got to house those in the newer structure. What will be the footprint of the guest house? We're looking to use as in a normal clubhouse of ours built from new. We'd have a central congregation space. So if we could take the footprint of this home and open it up and just have a real big central congregation space that maybe has a bar, tables, a place for the association to have parties and that sort of stuff. You don't really have the amount of other elements of the home that would impact the exterior. You're minimizing the amount of things that you need to touch, so you can keep it in its current state.
So, I mean, for example, I'm assuming the place has a center hall chimney, a center chimney, right, with 4 fireplaces around?
There's actually 2 chimneys on either end. I don't know if I think there's only 1 fireplace that's been preserved in the structure, though.
That's correct.
There's bathrooms, but those bathrooms, those bathrooms certainly don't meet any sort of accessibility standards. So there's gonna be no bathrooms in that structure. That will all be housed in the newer. This will really just be an open space.
And 2 stories, 1 story?
We gotta figure that out, right? So it's gonna be probably some combination of the 2, whether it's not a full 2-story space, maybe it's a story and a half, maybe it's a story and a half with an interior vaulted ceiling. These are all, next iteration details.
When you talk about preserving the exterior, you're talking about historically accurate window and keeping wood siding versus vinyl or
Yeah,
some
so we
other
would look to
aggregate
do,
material?
we talked with the building inspector about this when we met with Gray and Sabrina and the building inspector a couple of weeks ago. Look, there are, there are, our concern is also having to, from the exterior, to be historically accurate, right? So when you look at that building, the things that jump out are the divided light windows, right? So even if you put a new window in, it's got to be a divided light window, so it's historically accurate. The trim pieces that are up along the gables, like, those are not things that are going to be very easily replicated, so you want to preserve
So
as
you're
much
gonna
of
mill
that.
them if you need to replace
Or
them?
you look to just, reuse what's there if you can't,
Can't, and
can't
if not,
replicate it.
you'll mill them to match?
Sure, as close as you can get, yeah. But the structure itself it's an older home. It's fairly, I don't want to say simple, but it's not overly, elaborate, right? So as far as the siding goes, you can certainly put back up wood siding, but there are composite materials now, the fiber cement siding that are used, on historical buildings all the time, because they're meant to last, right? And it's just a better investment on that structure. So yeah, those are the things that we're gonna, that will be around too.
And to just ask a couple of other questions, I hate to sort of put you on the spot like this. In terms of, for example, partitioning that lot off and selling it and letting it be somebody's house, that's not an option?
That's not even a decision that's not a Toll Brothers decision, right? I mean, we're not the owners of the property right now. We're the contract vendee. So that's,
But in terms of options for your clubhouse in other locations on the property, is that even anticipated? If you had
we
to-
have not been able to find another location on the property that would not come at the, without losing units, right? I mean, the site is designed to be a very densely walkable community, right? So you start taking away significant land area, it's gonna come at the cost of losing homes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If I may.
Of course.
All I can say from personal experience, as far as this business of codes is concerned, if a building is deemed historic, New York State favors repurposing and will compromise. I've been there. I would say if Toll Brothers and their attorneys and so forth know something different, let them say so, but I think they might consult the Division of Building Standards first.
Yeah, but Gray, it's also a matter of public safety, If it's going to be used as a clubhouse, they may want to
But you
have
can
sprinklers
work
and other
around.
things.
The spaces, for example, on the first floor, you can't use that center hall, it's too narrow. But they all open into each other. There's no problem, that's not the problem. You can't satisfy all the codes, you must satisfy basic ones, but you can do that. You can design around it. As I say, I've been there.
Okay. Any other public comment? On any issue?
Well, on that house only.
Well, we're covering all the issues, so you could speak about anything.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to address the issue of the petition of Summit Greenfield for the amendment to the multifamily planned development preliminary concept plan for the East Village. I sent a letter to you today. Did you receive it?
I did not receive a letter from you today.
Okay, fine. So,
I think I've received prior letters from you, but not
okay,
today.
fine, so maybe this got not delivered, but it's okay. So effectively, there's no reason to allow Summit Greenfield to expand the footprint of East Village or to increase the density of utilization. We need to go back to the original time of 2015 when litigation was being resolved and when the parties decided to move forward and make a go of it. At that time, Toll Brothers was not in the picture. At that time, Summit Greenfield was focused on its legal rights to obtain a fair use of its property and request a change in zoning, which had previously been refused after 17 efforts of different plans, all of which have been opposed. And so the deal was, we're going to let go of our opposition, and you're going to get something of value. That was a deal. Today, we have what we call it, MFP PDCP, which is the longest thing I've ever heard in the law, okay? And it's what exists as a result of a negotiation and a settlement. And you don't get to a settlement and then come back and say, oh, by the way, I have a few more nibbles I want. Any more nibbles are basically a violation of the principles of that settlement. It's a breach of the trust of the town in making that concession and not preserving its right to continue the opposition to the attempted change of the prior zoning. So therefore, we have existing deal, we shouldn't change it. If we change it, what are we doing? We are increasing the density, we're increasing the utilization factor of that intersection, which is already overloaded, at the crossroads of Roaring Brook and 117. And we're creating more pollution, and if you look at the site where they have on point, there's a group of 4 additional units that they would like to add, which is called Unit Section U. And that would basically encroach upon the neighboring building, and you're basically creating more of a nightmare for the neighborhood.
I don't know, though, just a point of clarification. I don't think those are new buildings, I think they're relocated buildings.
Yeah, and let me
I
just
think
add.
some were moved.
Which buildings?
Those new ones that you're talking about in the back, those were moved, some were moved kind of away from where the Performing Arts Center is, so it was kind of moved back there. They're not proposing to add additional
Right.
townhouses, just to move them around.
Let me just.
Please clarify.
Let me just add on to that. When the settlement was entered into with the East Village and the residential, that was also before the Performing Arts Center was sold to the town for $1. So if you want to go back to your position, which is let's just stick to that initial deal, then we would have to give up the Performing Arts Center. They would tear it down, and they would put those 4 units that you're suggesting, the U units, over there. So there have been some changes, and they have been done, I wouldn't say negotiated agreements like the settlement deal, but sort of just a working together type of arrangement. So when they did give us the Chapco Performing Arts Center for $1, which is being utilized, and I think most residents appreciate it, and then the boundaries have since changed. We've increased the land around it so that it's a better amenity for the town, and also they were concerned about the neighbors that are close to it, right? Initially, they didn't think there's gonna be neighbors close to the Performing Arts Center. So that's why those 4 units have been moved. So it's not as if you term it as breaching our fiduciary relationship. It's actually, this has been developments that have been well documented over the years and brought us here today. This is not anything that's been like thrown upon residents at the last second.
So let me understand. The U unit, the 4 units that are designated as U, were those already part of the agreement when the new
Yes.
MFPD,
The 91 townhomes
PDCP came
have
in?
not changed.
Okay.
The things that have
They're
changed.
just being moved a little bit.
Right, the things that have changed is you're asking for 9 more bedrooms, so that some of the units would be, a couple more of the units would be 3 bedrooms instead of 2.
Right.
That's a change. That's not increasing, that's not changing the locations of those 4 units. That's just making a couple of units bigger.
It's making them higher density with a more capacity to use for commercial purposes, for rental purposes, for anything,
Yes, it's
anything
increasing-
you'd like to use.
And it's increasing the tax base and more tax revenue for the town, yes.
Well,
Because that is part of our fiduciary
every
duty as
increase
well.
okay, but that's marginal revenue coming at a high cost to the community of greater density, greater intensity of use, loss of value of the proximate homes next door.
Well, if you look at if you're building townhomes and if you're gonna market them to empty nesters, I mean, just think from like a logical point of view from yourself. You know, because we're also talking about basements in this equation. Like, just if I'm an empty nester and I'm thinking to move, and I live in a house, whether it be 2,500 square feet or 5,000 square feet, and if I'm looking to move, most likely I'm not going to be moving into a two-bedroom.
So-
right? If I raise my family here and now I'm looking to move, I'm not really going to move into a two-bedroom. I mean, maybe I have no choice, but if I could afford it, I'm going to want a three-bedroom, and I'm going to want some storage space, and I'm going to want some recreation space. So I think what they're trying to do is actually build things that they know consumers are looking for.
I would just like to add my comment into what Rob said, which is the argument that this is for empty nesters, I think is an assumption and not necessarily a proven fact.
Well, no,
But
because
what
Toll
it
Brothers
does-
doesn't know what they're doing, but Hala does.
Well,
They know
Rob,
exactly, they know
excuse me?
exactly who they're marketing to.
You are making standing appears if you know what's gonna happen in the market.
I know what they're
So-
marketing to.
Anyway, so what I was gonna say is, what they're basically doing is it's increasing the market base in general. So whether it's families with children, whether it's, as you said, people with home offices, or whether it's empty nesters in desperate need of storage space. The fact of the matter is, these are larger units, and it will allow for more people and more uses. It will increase the market value. I think so yes, I think that whether the assumption is it's only gonna be empty nesters and that's who they're gonna market to and that's who's gonna come into the Chappaqua School District, no, I think that's an assumption that's
Okay,
yet to
I
be
didn't,
proven.
I didn't say only, by the way, I
Okay.
said marketing towards empty nesters. And Toll Brothers can probably tell you based on their experience, exactly what percentage they think are gonna be empty nesters. That's what they do, and they're pretty good at it.
Well, you guys have surrendered. You've surrendered your authority
Well,
by accepting that principle.
we've worked with the applicant. If you call that surrender, then
That's surrender. You've acquiesced. You haven't.
What about the fact that we
you
got the
haven't
Performing Arts Center?
Excuse me, interrupting.
What about the fact that we got the Performing Arts Center for $1? Is that surrendering? What about the fact that we got 1.5 million from them? What about the fact that we got the 4 parcels of land along Roaring Brook Road? Is that surrendering to them? Are all these things surrendering to them? But what about the fact that we have mixed, an incredible residential complex which is affordable housing, workforce housing, and market rate housing in one building integrated? Is that surrendering to them? That's called working with the applicant for the betterment of the community.
Fine. So what surrender consists of is a failure to exercise prudent judgment by referring to the expertise of the applicant and not exercising your own suitable discretion, which is your fiduciary duty. So I just want to remind you of that. The rest we can discuss, okay? Thank you. So now as to the empty nester stuff, I was looking at Riverwoods a couple of years ago, say I'd like to live in Riverwoods. So I go looking with a broker, and guess what they show me? They show me a basement office. This is where a gentleman was running a real estate business, and he had an employee, and so the employee was there every day. Okay? So what we have is not just empty nesters. We have traffic, and we have utilization, and we have congestion. And then what I don't see on these maps here is how much parking you're going to do. I'd like to understand, what is the parking on the street? Is that going to be 2 hours only? Is it going to be overnight? What's going to be permitted? Because you're going to have congestion there, and that's going to be more intensity. So I'd like to have that as an issue which you address separately.
Well, the planning
Is
board
the
will
plan
address
on the
it.
website? Does anyone
I
know?
think we haven't gotten it yet from Summit Greenfield, I think we're
No,
still.
we don't deal with parking. We deal with, that's the planning board. I'm sure you've been following all the public meetings, both the planning board and the joint meetings with the town board. The parking is done with the planning board, and they have meetings, and you can attend their meetings and ask them the question.
Ultimately,
But is the,
Well,
I'm sorry, 1 second. Is the proposal, it's on the website, right? With there's a proposal
We
that,
had with them
right.
2 weeks ago.
It's all on the website.
Included
Does that-
drawings.
does that
yeah,
include
we've
that map?
seen those drawings.
Yes.
We've seen the drawings of the parking. I just want to make sure it's on the
Yes.
website.
You really should
Okay.
watch
And
the
it's
video of the
available.
joint meetings. They're very
so
informative.
I appreciate that. I'm here to talk with you.
Have you watched the
I
meetings?
just wanted to let you know if
Yes.
it's on the
Well, we
website,
can go
you can
Thank
look
you.
at it too.
Thank
Have you watched the joint meetings that we
Yes,
had?
I've watched some meetings, and
Very
I've reviewed some things with Sabrina, and I've been informed. I'm not totally informed, but I've done some homework.
Do you realize
I've
also-
acted in good faith.
Do you realize also that these units, these 91 townhomes, unlike Riverwoods, these are gonna be taxed as fee simple? You realize that too, right?
So on.
I'm not aware of that.
Well, that's a pretty big thing, right?
Okay, I understand that.
We
Taxes
had
are a third.
We've had
Riverwoods
two-
pays a third of what these people are gonna pay.
We've had two joint meetings with the planning board at which we've reviewed plans that include drawings that have the parking and also the layout for the units. It was September 24th was the
Okay.
first meeting, and then just last week, so that was November 19th.
Okay.
Are the two sessions, and the documentation should be on the website from those two meetings, which includes those plans.
So let me give you my political opinion, public opinion. I oppose the 9 additional bedrooms for reasons explained. I oppose the shortening of the driveways from 20 feet to 15 feet because that's only going to put more cars on the street, and that's going to be a nightmare for the other residents, and it's really not, unless you prohibit parking on the street so that you avoid congestion there. Excuse me. One thing, I think, if you look at the other Toll Brothers actions, look on the back of the sheet of my last page there, you have a wonderful photo of the Summit, New Jersey Toll Brothers operations. And what you don't see there is you don't see adequate parking, okay, and it's like, it's cropped in such a way you can't tell. So this is what you're looking at to get, and I don't know whether the presentations you've seen are more descriptive. How many feet are the widths of the roads and what parking is available, so you don't have to go circle around somebody who's parked. Anyway, so I'm opposing any further changes because I think you've given enough. The town has been through enough. We don't need to surrender our discretionary authority. We have legal principles. The fact that they've been kind enough to deal with this Performing Arts Center, that was a little bit of a hassle for them because you took an albatross off their neck.
Well, they would have demolished it.
Okay.
So you think we saved
Okay.
them money? Is that was a
So
benefit?
that was a bargain.
They also gave
We
us the
saved them
land.
some money.
What about the land they gave us? We saved them money?
So there's a question of whether they're entitled to all the things they've been asking for just because they want a zoning change. And the answer is no.
What about changing all the units to fee simple? Was that also,
Why,
surrender on
that's
that?
not even negotiable. That's what the town has the authority to do.
No, that was done after. That was done after. That was done after. That was part of what you term as.
I think it was part of them getting.
What you
the
term as,
So that
what
was-
you term as surrender.
So
So-
is this post-settlement? What is it?
Yes, post-settlement, that's correct.
Okay, well,
The
thank
surrender.
you. Okay, thank you.
By the way, if you're going to email the town board, the email is townboard@mynewcastle.org.
Fine, thank you for the, okay.
Thank you for
Thank
taking, thank
listening.
you for coming up and expressing your opinion. And thank you for
Any
sharing your
other,
thoughts.
any other public comments? Okay, so we're going to, Nick, go ahead.
Might I just for a moment, on a couple of items that were raised. Again, we're hopeful, Mark Weingarten, again, on behalf of the applicant. We think that our submission tomorrow will be able to satisfy a number of the questions that came up today, particularly with the guest house. There's a very lengthy report that comes in. It does talk about the structure and what needs to be done. Hopefully that will answer some of those questions. Just to be clear, and I was not here at the time, but as has been explained to me, there actually was no settlement that's being referred to today. There was a litigation that was brought because there was no approval that was forthcoming. The town went ahead and made an approval without any agreement with Summit at that time. And they went ahead and they did it, and after that, there were discussions, and there were things like the auditorium and other things happened. But the town went forward with an approval without any agreement or any settlement. There's no settlement document or anything that you're referring to. So I want to make it very clear when you say there was a settlement and now we're changing things, it's just not accurate. Town had an approval, and then there was a discussion on whether or not to drop the litigation or not, or go forward, and we've done that. What we'd like to point out, and I think the sentiment is here and you understand it, is that we have worked closely with the town since that point in trying to do the things that will soften the impacts and make it worthwhile to the town. Some of those have been raised today. One is the fee simple taxation that was at least double the tax on these units as would be if they were built in other places in the town. The question came up about parking again, because those are the kinds of things we discuss with the planning board. We don't spend a lot of time talking about it with you. You already have a code that requires one per unit plus one per bedroom. So a two-bedroom requires two spaces. A three-bedroom requires 2.5 spaces per car. And by the way, because we have two-car garages
and your code only allows us to count one car in each garage, because even if you have two, it doesn't count, it only counts as one. We have 90 extra spaces for or 91 extra spaces for the 91 units on top of that code that has either 2 or 2.5 per unit. So they're really, this is so overparked, it's hard to even have a conversation or a discussion about it. There's just no question about it. So we would hope that you would follow and take a look at the experts' reports. We're very confident in what we've put forward. And I just want to mention the other issue that came up about the supervisor is correct. We are marketing towards the empty nester, but their facts are facts, and the facts are the population of this county is what's leading to all of the new developments having a heavy concentration of that. And when you see the school numbers that we're going to put forward to you tomorrow, I think you're going to be pretty amazed. Firstly, you're not going to have any issue with how many elementary school children are coming out of you. I think that was your issue that we had a discussion. I think there's, off the top of my head, there's 5 of them that came out of the cupola building.
You said you've been working with the school district on these numbers.
We
I saw
have
some
them,
of
we
the emails
now
back
have them, and
forth.
we're submitting them from the school district itself. I think there's 5 elementary school children, and that's affordable and workforce housing, which has a higher concentration of school children than this type of housing would have. I think you'll find out when you go through the numbers, you're gonna find out that the cupola building was seriously overestimated. When you asked us how many school children and you did all the reports, the number that we said there were going to be, there's much less than what we had expected. So even your analysis from the going back there, now that we have actual numbers that are coming out, you're gonna find out that not only is the school impact gonna be less than you had originally thought, but that the economics to the town are even gonna be better because there's less school children coming out. It's just a fact of life of where we are, not even to mention that your school district above Grafflin, but as you get to the middle school and the high school, the impact of having a couple more children, you're actually losing population in those schools as opposed to going in the other direction where you were 5 or 6 years ago. So just wanted to point that out. Those will be in your materials tomorrow, and you have them, and we look forward to coming back at a later date and hopefully closing this out. Thank you.
And I would also add $2 million in tax revenue to the school district every year, and $400,000 to the town every year in additional tax revenue from these 91 townhomes. Nick, are we going to close the hearing and leave it open for written comment?
Well, at this point, because we've received expect to receive more application materials, I would suggest the hearing be adjourned to December 3rd.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody. Good night, you too.
You too.
Okay, on to a public comment, new business. Any other issue besides Chapwood Crossing? Thank you for coming, Greg. Happy Thanksgiving.
And Greg, we'll get you those materials when they come in too.
I do want to,
We're expecting new application submission material, so we should look those on the town.
Okay, fine. And where exactly do we put on Newcastle?
You can talk, John.
He likes
Hi
every-
there,
likes
my name is
undivided
John,
attention.
my name is John Ehrlich, I live on Apple Tree Close, and I wanted to change the tenor of discussion a little bit to focus on some of the amazing things that have happened this week, both in the town and elsewhere. I would like to focus on the fact that the new light that's functional, effective yesterday, I think will save lives. I think it mitigates a situation which resulted in 1 death. I think it's very, very important, and the thing that I would like the folks that are watching to know is that was not an easy situation to rectify in terms of getting the county and the state to solve this problem, because it is not a town road. I wanted also to say that the work that was done on South Greeley is extraordinary. Today, if you came without the trucks and the construction materials, and opening that wonderful lawn that's the near Town Hall that you see across from the library, it already looks much better, and it's going to look still much better. We really want to encourage folks to come downtown to walk, to shop, to do things, and not just because it's a fancy Saturday coming up for small business. But look at what you've done. And I think we have a town to be proud of, and I wanted to acknowledge that, particularly to the folks that are standing in front of me, and those in the back offices here that got this.
Point of, here, no one's standing in front of
Yeah,
you.
that's right.
Well,
Look like-
sitting,
Oh, sitting,
excuse
sure.
me, sitting in front of me.
Because I thought you might be talking about something else.
I would like
You
everybody.
got the wrong speech.
No, well, I don't know. I try not to, I don't want to give a speech, but all I want to do is just give a thank you, because this is Thanksgiving coming up, and one of the things that we're grateful for is this. So that was the point of my comment today, and let's move forward and make South Greeley even better. And I, as a town citizen, just let me and the rest of the townspeople know how we can help.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
It's John.
Well, it is gonna look a little better once they put the lights around the trees. Well, the
Poles.
trees and the poles. What do they call that again? The
Garlands.
Garlands. It's gonna look really nice.
I did forget one item, which we're going to do, is another celebration. As folks may realize, I have something to do with the local Rotary here. Remember, the Chappaqua Rotary is going to be having a party on New Year's Eve, similar to last year, where at the gazebo, they're going to welcome the new year with hot chocolate and a little bit of celebration downtown, some song, some music, and folks that don't have anything to do, please join us at 11:30 and welcome the new year.
Very nice.
Thanks.
And send that for the newsletter, John, please. I have it from last year, but it doesn't look anything.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other public comment? No? Okay. We move on to our resolutions.
Okay. I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $1,894,566.63 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detail report, each prepared on November 22nd, 2019. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, November 27th, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to adopt the following meeting minutes: January 2nd, January 8th, January 15th, January 22nd, and January 29th of 2019.
Regular meeting.
Regular meetings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to adopt the following resolution. Now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to New York Town Law 68, Town Board hereby approves the payment of the sum of $9,200 to fully and finally settle the action solely for the purpose of avoiding the burden and expense of further litigation, and further resolved upon the review and approval of the town attorney, the town administrator is authorized to execute a settlement agreement to effectuate the aforementioned settlement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain from voting on
And you've recused yourself, right?
I move to authorize the appointment of Beth Hungen, Fran Osborne, Betsy Toll to the Beautification Advisory Board for a three-year term, effective retroactively to November 11th, 2019 through November 10th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize the appointment of David Horowitz to the Environmental Review Board for a three-year term, effective retroactively from November 15th, 2019 to November 14th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you have a draft for this next one?
You have to wing
I
it.
do, so I can read that for you. Resolve that the town board hereby creates the Newcastle Airport Steering Committee as more detailed in the attached mission statement, and appoints Ken Silverman, Jim Smith, and John Yablonsky for a term expiring on December 31st, 2021, and Jason Leventhal as a town board member. Lichtenthal, excuse me, effective January 1st, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to approve change order number 1 for DeRosa Sports Construction, Inc. in Mamaroneck, New York, in the revised amount of $8,999.89 for the installation of a temporary asphalt walkway from the Town Hall parking lot to the South Commuter parking lot, to be completed by Friday, November 29th, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You do number, do you want to do number 2?
Sure. And I also move to approve change order number 2 for DeRosa Sports Construction, Inc. in the amount of $4,016.57 for the removal and disposal of a 36-inch maple tree and stump.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Whereas Arbor Day is coming up, so I resolve the town board proclaim Friday, April 24th, 2020 as 2020's Arbor Day in the town of Newcastle, and be it further resolved that the town board urges all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day, to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and to plant and care for trees in furtherance of the happiness and well-being of this and future generations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Maybe we should have separated those two resolutions.
Yeah, as we just approved the 36 maple coming down. That lost on me.
Keep on going.
I move to authorize Town Controller Rob Deary to execute on behalf of the town of Newcastle a sales order agreement with Atlantic Tomorrow's office for the purchase of 3 new copiers for a total purchase price of $24,611.67. This purchase will be paid from the IT infrastructure upgrade replacement capital project listed in the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve a banner request for the Chappaqua Children's Book Festival, which will take place on October 3rd, 2020, and will be displayed from September 20th until October 3rd of 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I move to approve a banner request for the school vote, which will take place on May 19th, 2020, and be displayed from May 11th to May 23rd.
Second.
All in favor?
Just keep going, Ivy.
I move to approve a banner request for the Rotary Pancake Breakfast, which will take place on April 25th, 2020, to be displayed April 12th through April 25th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I move to authorize the expenditure of $1,350 for the Food Scrap Recovery Program printing expenses.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good night, everybody.